I'm sitting back this morning, relaxing, having a cup of coffee, and I'm thinking or reflecting on John Wyndham. Recently, I had a conversation with Stephen E. Andrews, and he and I share John Wyndham as an influential author in our early reading of SF. And my friend John, the sci-fi scavenger, recently ranked John Wyndham's post-World War II novels in a video that I'll link in my description. Overall, I agree with most of his rankings, with one big exception, which I'll mention today. So I thought I'd reflect a little bit about my journey with John Wyndham. I first ran across John Wyndham in grade 9. I was assigned the Day of the Triffids in my English class. As someone who had enjoyed Star Trek, The Outer Limits, The Twilight Zone, this was up my alley. A science fiction disaster novel by a British author. I really enjoyed the conversations in that class, and then we got to see the movie edition. My classmates and I always loved it when we got to see a movie in school. It took a couple periods to get through it. Of course, the movie wasn't as good as the book. Then, late in the 70s, my family was shopping in Eaton's. That's a department store here in Canada. One of the floors had a corner that was dedicated to selling books. There, I found my first Penguin, John Wyndham. Now, I can't recall which one I first purchased, but there were 10 that were eventually published, and I have them right here. As you can see, they had orange spines. This one is very faded. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. So in chronological order, we had the Day of the Triffids. I don't know if you know, but there was another novel after World War II that John Wyndham started to write, and it wasn't published until almost 60 years later. It's called Plan for Chaos. This was a novel with flying saucers and Nazis in Brazil. The Boys from Brazil by Ira Levin is way better than this one. This, I'm glad they didn't publish it at the time. Why? Because the failure of that novel led John Wyndham to write The Day of the Triffids. Plan for Chaos was more like some of the pulp fiction of the 1930s. On a side note, this is a Penguin edition from 2010, and this livery I think is one of the worst liveries for purchasing John Wyndham books, my opinion. The reason I have it, though, is it was the only edition I could purchase of Plan for Chaos. If I wasn't a completist for having John Wyndham's work, that's a book I wouldn't keep. So anyways, let's get back to his good work from after World War II, The Day of the Triffids. This has become a classic, taught in schools here in Canada. I'm not sure if it's still taught in schools. This is a catastrophe novel. We have a couple things going on at the same time. There's mysterious lights in the sky similar to a meteor shower. It blinds people. And then there are genetically modified plants that are capable of hunting and eating humans. They shuffle along on their roots. It may not sound that sophisticated, but it's well done here in this book. But the reason I think this really connected with people is the whole world was recovering from World War II. The veneer of civilization had been laid bare. What would happen if we couldn't see and plants were hunting us? The protagonist is someone who had eye surgery, and his bandages didn't come off until after the light event in the sky. The cover for this series of 10 novels, printed near the end of 1970 and into the early 80s, is by Peter Lord. This by far is my favorite printing run of John Wyndham. Besides the Fawcett and Penguin Peter Lord editions, I have 2 more editions of The Day of the Triffids, except for one of them is not even titled The Day of the Triffids. It's titled Revolt of the Triffids, an alternate title that was used here in North America. It actually had been published in Collier's magazine using this title, and so when they went to the novel form here in North America, they kept that title. This is a Popular Library edition. It's got a green text block to it. And I have one more over here, but we'll get to that soon. The second novel that he wrote, or actually that was published after World War II, was The Kraken Wakes. If you want a summary of all these novels, I think you should go and see John's video, John Wyndham Ranked. Right now, I'd like to just reminisce a little bit about purchasing these books and show you these beautiful Peter Lord covers. I do think that Wyndham found a niche that he tried to occupy with some of the novels that came out later in the 1950s. His third post-war novel published is The Chrysalids. This, to me, is perhaps the worst of the Peter Lord covers. Not for the sake of the art, but for the sake of the art matching the content of the book. This is a post-nuclear war book, and there are mutations, but nothing like this. So this is a random piece of art. Now, there is some random art for collections of stories from John Wyndham. For example, this one. The next book published was The Seeds of Time, a collection of John Wyndham stories. I did like this cover art. This book in particular, though, has faced sun damage here, so it doesn't have the orange edge that the other ones do. Now, I said I had a minor disagreement with the ranking that John, the sci-fi scavenger, created for his video of the novels after World War II. This is the one that I disagree with. I think this one should be probably 2 places higher than what John placed it. You'll have to look at his video to see what that placing is. The Midwich Cuckoos. I particularly like this cover because the boys seem to have a bit of an attitude. And if you're familiar with the story, it kind of actually accentuates their difference in the community. This was filmed as Village of the Damned and did quite well in the theaters. The Outward Urge is a fix-up of 4 novellas. Once again, some spectacular artwork, but I didn't think that this matched up with the novels that he created in the 1950s. In fact, this felt more like something he produced in the 1930s. The Trouble with Lichen, a strong female protagonist in this one. Another collection of stories, Consider Her Ways and Others. We're into the 1960s now. Chalky. I really enjoyed this one. I think this is a minor work of his that really needs some attention. It's almost more of a novella, but it is a strong story, a story about a boy with an imaginary friend. But is that friend really imaginary? I thought this was a spectacular cover. Now, this book here is a little bit of an oddity. I'll show you why. Let's take out this other one. It's almost like this book has been chopped. It's not as tall as the rest. It makes me wonder if it had been a remainder. Sometimes remainders had a saw cut at the top, and I'm wondering if somebody actually clipped it. I don't know. If somebody knows why one book would be a little bit shorter than the others, I'd like to hear. And then Web. This is a special one. It was published posthumously. It was first published by Michael Joseph in 1979, and then this Penguin edition in 1980. This is another book that has been overlooked that I think bears attention for those who enjoy John Wyndham. So those were the 10 books that I collected in the 1980s. Just prior to starting this channel, I discovered online that there was a novel of John Wyndham's that I had never seen before. In fact, it wasn't a science fiction novel. It was called Foul Play Suspected. It had been out of print for over 70 years. So I pre-ordered it and reviewed it here on the channel. This is from Modern Library. This, once again, is when my collecting itch took over. Enjoying the livery and how easy it was to read, I decided to buy all the Wyndham books that they published. Now, there are some that are ebooks that are not in physical form, but these are the ones that they've published so far. Stowaway to Mars. This is from Wyndham's pulp era in the 1930s. It was also called The Planet Plane. Then we have, of course, The Day of the Triffids. So this is the 4th edition of The Day of the Triffids that I own. I would say that this really is my reading edition. The Kraken Wakes. I think you've been noticing the minimalist style here. The cover illustrations for this print run are by Anders Nilsson. The Midwich Cuckoos. And Trouble with Lichen. Of the major Wyndham novels, the only one that they're really missing is The Chrysalids. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but that was another novel that had been taught here in the schools in Canada. I have one more book I want to show you today. Hidden Wyndham. This is a biography by Amy Binns. Its subtitle is Life, Love, Letters. From the back of the book, John Wyndham redefined science fiction. His dystopian classic, The Day of the Triffids, and the eerie alien children of the Midwich Cuckoos left a lasting legacy on our imaginations. Yet, despite his popularity, his obsessive need for privacy led to him being known as the Invisible Man of science fiction. In Hidden Wyndham, Amy Binns reveals for the first time the woman who was the inspiration for his strong-minded heroines. Their secret love affair sustained this gentle and desperately shy man through failure, war, and ultimately success. Now, that could be said to be both the strength and the weakness of the book. While I learned a great deal about Wyndham, his letters felt intensely private. I do have some more Wyndham books. They're all pre-World War II, and I'm not going to show them here today. I've been thinking about why I connected so strongly with Wyndham's work. Time of life was definitely part of the equation. I was a tall, awkward teenage boy wearing glasses who loved science fiction, and here was an author that was thought of highly enough that they taught him in school. Wyndham's novels are high-concept novels, yet very down-to-earth characters. The protagonists were very human and very idealistic. There seemed to be a faith in humanity. Some of that optimism that you feel from Star Trek, the original series, was in Wyndham's writing as well. It felt like in reading Wyndham, I was led into a world that no one else really knew about. Besides being assigned Wyndham in school, I'd never met another person who was reading Wyndham for fun. That is, until I started watching booktube. And now, I'm sharing Wyndham with you. If you are new to him, I would suggest starting with novels such as The Day of the Triffids, Midwich Cuckoos, and The Chrysalids. And a dark horse favorite of mine is Chalky. So I'd love to hear about authors who grabbed your imagination at a young age. Did you collect all their work? What was it about them that connected with you? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep reading.